Shabbat Shalom. Are you one of those people who can hear the pain in people's voices? Sometimes it's obvious, other times it's muted. Can you listen to them and really hear within their words, their sound, whether they've had a bad day, bad week, maybe a bad year? Being able to hear the pain of people is so important to be able to understand who they are. To know somebody is to know their pain. In this week's Torah portion, we read about the plagues, the first 7 plagues in Egypt. And it's the middle of the Exodus story, if you will. Ultimately, that will liberate the Israelites from Egypt. But how did the liberation story begin? What was the beginning that indicates that it was time for their enslavement to end? Well, text tells us, the Torah, that God heard the cries of the Israelites. You see, God might have had a grand plan, but when God hears the cries of pain of the Israelites, he knows that after centuries of enslavement, that it is time for them to leave. Their pain is just too great to endure anymore. And so the events unfold of the Exodus itself. The importance of hearing pain and be able to amplify it, and then to recognize the need to free people, to change the status of enslavement. This weekend, we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. A time we remember the great Dr. King for the work that he did in civil rights in the 50s and 60s to force us to hear the voices of the oppressed. That's what Dr. King did, to see and hear their stories. See, that's how we break down the barriers of hatred, is to know people's pain. On this weekend of Martin Luther King Jr., celebration of his work, it's important to remember the pain that we hear in all people's voices. No one should be oppressed, whether we're talking about a religion, a race, any ethnic group. We must be focused on removing the oppression and hatred that exists. So on this weekend of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, let's think about the pain of others. Whether it's somebody in their family, a friend, somebody in another faith community, it's important to be able to hear that pain. I believe that's the important work of religious groups, is to engage in part in interfaith activities, to hear each other's stories and pain so that we can remove that hatred. It's hard to hate somebody when you feel their pain. So on this Shabbat, I want you to think about Martin Luther King Jr. We'll be celebrating his birthday officially next Shabbat, the Friday night of the 19th, with our annual interfaith service. I hope you'll join us then. But for this Shabbat, wish you a Shabbat of reflection and a Shabbat of peace. Shabbat Shalom.